Hey, what's going on everybody? Leo Invest here, back with another trade recap video. This video is going to entail my NASDAQ short position that I took on Wednesday at around that 9 to 9:30 a.m. open for New York session. And reason why I want to go through this recap once again is this is covering the candle to unicorn in correlation with the T-Trades fractal model. So I felt like this would be a very useful recap for many of you out there learning the T-Trades fractal with that higher time frame alignment, as well as higher time frame sweeps and session sweeps. So getting right into it now, I think it's important that we start off with the higher time frame analysis for my entry into this trade. And it all starts from this London low that was formed down here at 3 a.m. So what did we see happening with London lows here? Well, during this London session, we saw the beginning of a bearish leg at around this 2 o'clock candle, where finally we saw an extension down to these lows here at around 22,929. Now, what did we see happen with this 30-minute 3 o'clock candle, aka this 3 to 3:30 a.m. candlestick? Well, we saw a very aggressive bullish wick as well as a bullish candle body closure, which ended up being a reversal signature on London during this 30-minute time frame. So, what did we see happen after London after this 3 a.m. candle? Well, we saw an extension higher where we saw a continued bullish leg where we had this expansion, this retracement at 5 o'clock, this expansion, retracement, expansion, retracement, expansion, retracement, up until we saw these highs at around this 8:30. And so what did I notice about these 8:30 highs that gave me interest into potentially looking for a short position on NASDAQ? And what I looked at primarily was at this 8:30 open, what do we see happened here? At 8:30, we had this bullish extension, and then the 8:30 to 9 or the 9 to 9:30 candlestick, the 30-minute, ended up having a very, very weak bullish closure. Although we did have a bullish wick, the bullish candle body closure did not really signal that bulls were too heavy in market. And so typically when I see this, especially that we were outside of this range from this accumulation that had started from Tuesday at around 7 p.m., I was looking to see if we could get some type of higher time frame sweeping out that 8:30 higher prior to looking for a short signature down into these lows. And so look at this. When we look at this candlestick, what exactly am I waiting to see? Well, here we go. And it starts also with this hourly. So let's map out a couple layers of confluence that would help me for this trade setup. And obviously gave away the trade there, but let's just map out the equilibrium of this previous hourly candlestick. It's going to start with the candle wick low to the candle wick high here, and we are going to extend it out. Mark this as our EQ, and this in specific became our EQ of the hourly candle. And when I mean the EQ of the hourly, I mean the previous hourly prior to the short signature move. Then we mark out the high of this candle, as well as we will mark out that 8:30 open that we saw on this 30-minute candle on the following. So here we go, and we saw that that was the 8:30 open, which I'll mark out on the smaller time frame. So what was I looking to see here? Well, as I mentioned before, with a weakening bullish strength, I wanted to see bears start to pick up in market. But in order to really see a validation on a short signature, I want to see a sweep out of the high of that previous hourly, which in this case would be that 8:30 high that was formed here. And so ideally for this 9 to 9:30 candle to see a sweep above, followed by a change in state of delivery back into these lows and retrace into this hourly equilibrium that was formed from that 8 a.m. up until 9 o'clock hourly. So let's now move to the smaller time frame to find out my entry for this trade in specific. And we'll start with the 3-minute and then make our way to the 1-minute where my entry was taken. So let's extend the charts a little bit here. And what do we notice about this specific period in market? Well, first of all, we have this 8:30 open here, which I'll make sure that I mark out. Since this did have a data window during this 8:30 open, we'll mark this as our 8:30 open. And then what else do we notice? Well, typically when we are looking for higher probability setups, we want to ensure that we are finding a correlation to the power of 3 prior to looking for some high probability setup. If you want a setup to truly be A+, looking for power of 3 movement is going to be the most valuable way to find a higher probability setup. And so here, what do we notice happened during this 8 o'clock session? Well, first of all, we created this data high, which 8:30 open created the high of this range. And then on the 3-minute time frame, what do we also see happened here? Well, we actually just accumulated, and we accumulated for a decent amount of time here, starting this accumulation from 8:30 up until this 9:27, being the pre-New York Open when equities would open. So we're going to mark this out now as our ACM, aka our accumulation, and we'll get that to the top of the chart just to keep it clean for all of you here. And so this now becomes our accumulation. And if we look about the power of 3 for trades, what do we typically want to see? Well, with power of 3, we want to ensure that we look for the 3, the big 3. Accumulation, manipulation, and distribution. And so now, what are we seeing market doing pre-9:30 New York AM session open? Well, we are currently accumulating on multiple different timeframes, being the 1 minute, 3, 5, as well as the 15. And so when I see this accumulation occur as a trader, what am I looking for? And if we align this with my higher timeframe bias on the 30-minute, I said that I was looking for a sweep of that 8:30 high up here prior to seeing some type of an extension down to this 8:30 open and potentially even the swing lows here at 7:39 a.m. So now let's see what exactly happens at this 8:30 open. And we'll move this next candlestick to just give you an entry. Here we see on the 3-minute, we saw this. So actually I'm going to move to the 1 minute since my entry was taken on the 1 minute time frame. So on the 1 minute here, you see that we created this very aggressive range on the 1 minute where we were accumulating quite a bit. And then pre-9:30 open, this 9:29 candle, what do we see happen with the now 9:30 open? Well, 9:30 swept out of this accumulation range, aka we now had a manipulation leg of our power of 3. And as we remember, when you have accumulation and manipulation, what is the following thing? And that is distribution. And because we manipulated these highs of the higher time frame, being the previous hourly high as well as the 2 previous 30-minute highs, we also swept out of the range, aka we manipulated this accumulation high, which gives me insight that market makers want to push market to some temporary low and or just want to reverse trend outside of this bullish trend into a bearish trend. And so now what do we see on this 1 minute time frame? Well, we formed a change in state of delivery because we swept out these previous hourly, 30-minute, and 15-minute highs. This 2 candle body undisrupted closure now becomes our change in state of delivery. And to be specific, this becomes our bullish change in state of delivery, which we'll mark out here with the red marker. And so as the typical fractal model states, we want to see a closure below this change in state of delivery, but also we want to look to see whether or not we get a candle body closure. And in this example, we saw a candle body closure, which would yield a fractal model entry. But what else did we notice here? And this is where it gets fun. Well, with the candle to unicorn setup, we also ended up getting a breaker block that formed on the 1 minute as well. And so here with this candlestick here becomes the 1 minute, apologies. This now becomes the 3-minute and the 1 minute breaker block, which I will mark out here. And so this high, this candlestick here, ended up becoming a breaker block. So I'll mark this out on the chart here, and we will mark this out as our breaker block, which for the fractal, with the candle to unicorn, as I mentioned, becomes another layer of confluence that can help with the probability of a trade setup. Mark this out as our breaker on the 3-minute. And so now what I wanted to see was a closure both below this 3-minute breaker block, or aka this 1 minute and 3-minute breaker block, as well as below this change in state of delivery, because the candle to unicorn utilizes the base fractal model, but adds in a breaker block in order to confirm a higher probability trade. And because we are now tying this C2U model, the candle to unicorn, with the power of 3 being this accumulation, this manipulation of this high here, which we all mark in this red triangle. And now we are now seeing a closure below the change in state of delivery. Now, in order to be signaled into an entry, I'm waiting to see a candle body closure both below the change in state and the breaker. So we play this following candle here. We see a very big extension lower, but I did not enter here. I wanted to see market retrace a bit because we had such an aggressive move. I was anticipating price to move back a little bit prior to seeing this continuation into these 830 lows. So you'll see here we get this expansion lower, and then what do we see happen here, where we see this retrace prior to our next continuation lower. And so on the 1 minute time frame, which I actually have my entry was taken at around 22, let me get the exact numbers, it was 23,059.25. And so this became my short signature entry here. So I will mark this out on the chart. 59.25, 59, oops, sorry guys, we'll just mark this out as our 59.25. And where does my stop lie? Well, with the candle to unicorn, my stop would lie at the top of the breaker block, which was a 15-point stop. And then where can I see liquidity going? Well, currently we are negative R is a 0.86 R, which means we are risking more than we are intending to make. And so I want to extend this to a 2R on this trade. And if we see here, where does this 2R align? Well, this 2R aligns almost perfectly with this 830 open, which was an area where we could anticipate price pulling to. And so now with this entry taken, and I'll just give a false entry because this wasn't, I can't get the exact fill on this TradingView replay. This was exactly kind of how the trade setup played out. So now we will let this play out here and we'll see what happens. We see on the next 1 minute, we had got taken out at the 830 open where I scaled out of one of my minis and then looked for these short-term lows here at 740 as another potential area for price to go to. And here we see we finally got an extension down to this 7:40 a.m. low. So all in all, this trade ended up being a perfect A+ trade setup. It was a 4R on my final mini, one of two minis, with my first one being taken out at 2R at that 830 open. So just to summarize this trade once again for all of you, since I know this is quite a few words to take into account, what did we notice here? Well, we saw this accumulation occur, we saw manipulation of this accumulation leg, and then we saw the distribution occur. But the important thing is we tied in this power of 3 with the fractal and the candle to unicorn model, aka the C2U, where we saw this change in state of delivery form with this manipulation of the previous hourly and 30-minute highs. And then we saw a candle body closure below the change in state and this breaker. And my entry was taken on the retrace of the breaker after we had a very, very expansive 1 minute candle that formed a bearish leg. So with my entry being taken at 23,059.25, this ended up yielding a beautiful trade where we found our price targets, taking my first contract out at 2R just below this 830 open, and then my second one at this 7:40 a.m. low. So anyways, this was just a very informative educational recap for the candle to unicorn that I took in correlation with the power of 3. And if you guys do enjoy these type of videos, feel free to like and subscribe for more like this, as it helps out the channel quite a lot and lets me know that you guys like these recaps. And I will catch you all in the very next video. Bye now.